Hi there, 8th graders. This is History, Chapter 19, Section 1 about World Affairs, and this is Part 2. I will be reading 580 to 582. Do follow along. Aggression and Appeasement. American hopes to concentrate on domestic affairs, relatively isolated from foreign concerns, were quickly dashed. Events in the world began to send off alarms of trouble ahead. Japanese expansion in the Pacific. Between 1872 and 1925, Japan's population nearly doubled, causing severe problems for that small island nation. To sustain industrial growth, Japan needed larger markets for its products and more raw materials for its factories. To meet these needs and to ease overcrowding in the home islands, Japan pursued a policy of expansion in the Pacific. During World War I, Japan supported the Allies, but used the war to increase its influence in China. After the war, Japan was bitter toward the West. The Washington Conference of 1921 cost Japan most of its gains in China and limited Japan's naval power. When the U.S. joined other Western nations in 1924 in banning immigrants from Japan, its leaders looked to military solutions for their nation's problems. In September 1931, Japanese troops invaded and occupied mineral-rich Manchuria in northeastern China. When the League of Nations demanded that Manchuria be returned to China, Japan ignored the order. Threats from Germany and Italy. On March 5, 1933, the day after Roosevelt took office, the German parliament voted Adolf Hitler, the National Socialist Nazi leader, the power he needed to begin a program of conquest in Central and Eastern Europe. In Italy, dictator Benito Mussolini made similar plans to control the Mediterranean and to expand Italy's empire in Africa. Mussolini and Hitler followed a new political doctrine known as fascism, a form of government in which a dictator and supporters cooperate to seek more power for their nation, usually at the expense of rights for individuals. Each ruler established a totalitarian state, a nation that totally controls the lives of its people. The fascists in Italy and the Nazis in Germany set up all-powerful official parties. Both whipped up support with huge patriotic rallies, parades, music, and appeals to national pride and racial hatred. And both used force to silence all opposition. Each dictator blamed his country's problems on World War I, on undesirables in society. Mussolini accused Italy's communists of causing strikes and social unrest. The Nazis blamed Germany's economic chaos on its Jewish population. They restricted Jews, boycotted Jewish-owned stores, and destroyed synagogues. Both Hitler and Mussolini hated that another war might be necessary to right the wrongs they felt had been done to their countries by the Treaty of Versailles. The glorification of war by Italy, Germany, and Japan was not idle talk. In 1935, Mussolini attacked and took control of Ethiopia in Africa. In 1937, Japanese armies invaded the rest of China. In March 1938, Hitler marched into Austria. In 1936, General Francisco Franco rebelled against the Republican government of Spain, and German and Italian tanks, bombers, and troops helped Franco win a bitter civil war that lasted until 1939. Can you tell in that section there's just a lot of tension within a lot of countries in Europe that have very powerful leaders who've become dictators. They totally control their people. You've probably heard of Adolf Hitler before. Bargaining for peace. The response of Great Britain and France was appeasement, a policy of giving aggressor nations what they wanted in order to avoid war. Like the Americans, the British and French were disillusioned by World War I and just wanted peace. Much as they disliked Italian, German, or Japanese expansion, they disliked the thought of war even more. Pacifism, that's peacefulness, reached new heights. A majority of the students in the debating union at Britain's Oxford University voted that on no account would they go to war for king or country. Appeasement reached its peak at the Munich Conference of September 1938, when British and French leaders allowed Hitler to annex part of Czechoslovakia in return for his promise to make no further territorial demands. British Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain returned from Germany to tell a jittery world that the Munich Pact meant peace for our time. Winston Churchill, however, who soon would replace Chamberlain as Prime Minister, observed that Britain and France had to choose between war and dishonor. They chose dishonor. They will have war. Neutrality. The American people were also determined to avoid war. World War I had left the United States with a huge domestic debt and billions of dollars in foreign debts that could not be collected. Americans also wanted to avoid war for a number of other reasons. A congressional investigation of the munitions industry revealed that American manufacturers had made large profits by supplying arms and credit to the Allies during the years of 1914 to 1917. This led to the notion that American participation in World War I had been arranged by merchants of death, assisted by British propagandists. There was increasing feeling that William Jennings Bryan had been correct in 1914 in urging that the United States supply no arms to the belligerents, make them no loans, and abandon defense of neutral rights on the high seas. To prevent being drawn into war again, Congress passed Neutrality Acts in 1935, 36, and 37. These laws barred the transportation or sale of arms to warring nations and banned loans to nations at war outside the Western Hemisphere. The restrictions of the Neutrality Acts did not please Roosevelt, who believed they would drag us into war instead of keeping us out. He had wanted legislation that would allow him more discretion, for example, to embargo supplies on one side but not to the other. On October 5, 1937, he warned the American people that war was contagious. Innocent people are being cruelly sacrificed to a greed for power and supremacy. Let no one imagine that America will escape. War is contagion, whether it be declared or not. Roosevelt signed the Neutrality Acts without protest. However, he would have preferred some freedom to distinguish between aggressors and victims. The president believed that Germany, Italy, and Japan were bad neighbors who were bent on war. In a speech in October 1937, Roosevelt called for the abandonment of isolation, but American public opinion forced him to drop any idea of collective action against aggressor nations. "It's a terrible thing," Roosevelt remarked, "to look over your shoulder when you're trying to lead and find no one there." Thanks for listening.